The film I'm recommending today is because you talked about The Exorcist 3, Exorcist the Third, last time. I thought we'd stay in the
Episode 3, more exorcism.
the Revenge of the Exorcist. The
Good.
good. I'm recommending a horror film from the classic era of the the Universal horror movies. Was it directed by? Was it from Universal? I think it was. It's directed by James Whale. Anyway, it's The Old Dark House from 1932.
That's such a good film.
It is a delight. It is the perfect James Whale, film. It is full of it's full of camp humor and little nods to James Whale's own queer identity and things like that, and it has it has a lot of fun putting its characters through absolute hell, and it has it has some genuinely quite unnerving moments, but it is just the classic of the genre. People lost at night in the rain, in the dark, turn up at an old spooky house, which is full of fucked up shit. And it is so amazing how the initial thing is like, okay, well, there's a creepy brother and sister, and they have a sort of mute manservant played by Boris Karloff, who's also got loads of like cuts on his face. His name is Morgan. You've got Lillian Bond, who plays the sister who can't hear anything. Oh no, sorry, I don't mean Lillian Bond. I mean Eva Moore. Lillian Bond's one of the leading ladies. Eva Moore is this character, Rebecca Femme, and her brother Horace Femme, played by Ernest Thesiger, who was Dr. Pretorius in Bride of Frankenstein. He
was great in The Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, and he's great in this too. I mean, they're just incredibly strange characters, and then you realize sort of partway through the film that there are other characters upstairs, and the film gives you this sort of it's a bit of a like layered approach. Like you think, okay, there's just a lot of weird stuff in this house, and I'm not sure about the manservant guy because he's very weird. And then you see that that they also have like a very old relative upstairs who's in this bed, and he talks like this. And it's very creepy, and has
woman, actually.
Oh right, I was wondering about that actually when I watched it. Yeah, I didn't bother to look that up. Probably should have done. Yeah, Elspeth Dudgeon. There you go. Sir Roderick Femme. But you think so? Okay, so that's weird. And you've got Saul. You've got your Morgan guy, but then there's Saul, and Saul enters the film very, very late and makes one hell of an impression. He's played by Brember Wills. And he's locked in a room at the top of the stairs. And at one point, Morgan gets drunk and decides, what will be fun? I'm going to let this guy out. And so you've got a house full of these London types coming out, and with their balls all shiny. These
don't
these
know the
fancy
place. Jeff does.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Dougie.
You've got these London types who've come out there, and you've got Charles Lawton, and they're just desperately trying to get through the night without having any more weird interactions with these people, and getting bullied by the femmes or creeped out by them, or getting groped by Morgan. And then all of a sudden Morgan releases into their midst this pint-sized lunatic Saul, who is
bit of a fire lover.
He's an arsonist, and he's also a homicidal maniac. Yeah. And but he starts by being all like meek and like, oh, these people are terrible to me, and they beat me and blah blah blah. And you're like, oh, he's a cute little guy. And then it's like, oh no. He's the Scrappy Doo of this of this family. Like he's the worst possible addition you could have to the already like strange situation that's going on. And yeah, he wreaks absolute havoc, and it all ends, and it's just one of those great 30s horror films which really sets the template for how horror films are going to be made in the sound era. Like every single time someone says something even remotely ominous, there's a thunder clap from outside. The lighting is just full of, you know, expressionist contrasts. But there's also just a ton of joking around and bantering and like over the top performances. You make a lot of uses made of you know, noises and little sounds and keys turning in locks and people, you know, boots on stairs and you know, metal things scratching against stone walls. And so, you know, it's just the classic, you get just the full array of like, this is the haunted house. What's interesting about it is I thought going into it, I was like, sure enough, this is going to be about ghosts, but like all of the horror is real. And I think that's what's kind of great about this film that sets it apart from so many of the other films of this era, is it's not about a monster or about some kind of supernatural thing. Like, this is all like technically possible. This is this is about like a severely like psychologically damaged family, and the havoc that they are able to wreak by just like being left to their own devices. It so strongly reminded me of the League of Gentlemen, you know, the first couple of seasons with the local
I never watched the League of Gentlemen, but
there's some great, because Mark Gatiss was involved in that, as you know. Like so I think he's picked up a lot of stuff from James Whale and put it in the League of Gentlemen. It's interesting that James Whale was you know, like openly and like flamboyantly gay at a time when it wasn't like easy to be so, at least in you know, in he was known to be that in Britain. And I think it's so interesting how that sensibility pervades this film and the Bride of Frankenstein, of course. And I think that that sort of smuggling in of like little jokes or little you know, what shall we say, sort of asides or references is like, is important. And I think this film has a little bit of a history of, you know, being an early sort of nod to you know, to LGBT stuff. So yeah, I just think it's a really fun like Halloween movie, and I think for especially if you're not into like getting really creeped out or anything, this is perfect. Although there are definitely like creepy moments.
There are some very creepy moments, but it's a very sort of, it plays a lot on the camp humor of the movie, and I think the scares kind of creep in and where you feel a bit like, oh, I'm just watching a funny little film, and then like, oh shit, there's some creepy stuff happens, but it's done in a way that's not like, you know, it's not like movies that come out these days, which is just like quiet, bang, and quiet, bang. It's still, there's like an unnerving like aspect throughout the entire film. I think like Mark Kermode called it, some horror films that modern horror, he called it like cattle prod cinema.
Yeah, well, you know, the sort of modern way of making it. Yeah, absolutely. And it has it gets predictable after a while.
It does get very predictable. I think that's the problem with a lot of movies that get made these days, because they do, I think some people are very good and they understand building up scares and creating an atmosphere. I think if you create an an example is like Hereditary. Hereditary is a film that has some very jumpy moments, but is a film that makes you feel incredibly intense throughout the entire film, because you're always waiting, because you're sitting there feeling like something's bad is about to happen every second. So you're watching this film like sweating like hell. And especially with Midsommar as well, there's just that sense of uneasiness that just plays out throughout the entire film. I think Ari Aster does it really well. And even Jordan Peele with Get Out and Us. I think he's another filmmaker who has this incredible feeling of uneasiness throughout the entirety of those two films.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Peele has definitely been watching James Whale as well, because I think what Jordan Peele understands is that there's nothing wrong with putting in some really funny jokes and some humorous situations into a really scary scenario. And and I loved Us, and I really liked, I mean, Get Out is a masterpiece.
Yes.
So, I think I think a lot of people maybe skip over this film when they look back on this era. It doesn't appear in a lot of box sets, I've noticed, because most people think, oh, well, you know, it's all about the Universal monsters. It's all about the Mummy and Frankenstein and the Invisible Man, and later on you get the Wolfman, the creature from the Black Lagoon. But
Dracula.
this is Dracula, of course, and Frankenstein, and the
Why not Frederick Frankenstein?
Marty Feldman in that film. Oh,
Abby something.
yeah, there, Wolf.
Walk this way.
He, okay, stop.
Sorry, continue.
So this film, I wasn't previously really aware of it. I was going back over, just thinking, have I missed anything? And I just looked at the cast and I was like, oh, bloody hell. And this is, this is the era where Charles Laughton really was such a megastar. And he just comes roaring into the Hollywood scene full of just, he's such a presence. And obviously the other great horror film that he makes at this point in time is The Island of Lost Souls, which is
an RKO film.
I
think.
He's not long off winning the Oscar for playing Henry VIII in The Private Life of Henry VIII. But yeah, you should also watch the Old Dark House because it's not very long. It's very enjoyable, and it's where it is where the haunted house genre kind of learns its steps.
It's a perfect dark and stormy night in a haunted house, in a scary house movie, and I think it's like one of the first of its kind.
Definitely.